Hello friends, this week the topic is Airbnb, and we're going to look at how important it is to be early. Early to connect with your customers, number one, and also early to get help and mentorship along the way, and perhaps even consider joining an incubator, and we're going to show you how that worked out for Airbnb. Airbnb, who are they? Well, if you're around the world, you should be familiar with them. They connect people that have a room, an apartment, or even a home to rent with people that want to rent those things for a short time. They make a little bit in the middle, a little bit off the person renting their room, and they make a cut of the transaction of the person paying for the room or the home. That's how they make their money, and they are a global phenomena and amazing levels of valuation I'm going to take you through. A record-setting startup to established global company. Let's go back and look at where it all started back in 2007. This is the story of this company starting in 2007, and who would know that 10 years later they would have raised over $4.1 billion, and they're out there propagating a marketing and branding message that promotes a sense of belonging and a sense of being. Very interesting the way they've done that. So it all starts with a gentleman named Brian Chesky and his friend Joe Gebbia. And they had come from New York and they were living in San Francisco, and like most aspiring entrepreneurs, they were broke. And they were looking at money being tight, and they're saying, gosh, we got to pay our rent, we got to live, while they're trying to figure life out. And they were looking for a way to earn some extra cash. And they noticed that all the hotel rooms seemed booked up in San Francisco every time there was a conference. And there was an industrial design conference coming to town, and it had once again booked everything up. And they said, listen, what if we put up a fast website called Air Bed and Breakfast? And we'll get a couple inflatable air beds, air mattresses with a sleeping bag or a blanket, and we'll sell people the opportunity to sleep in our living room here in our flat. And they're like, seriously? Yeah, let's try it. So they bought some air mattresses and some other materials and set it up and put a quick website up simply called the Air Bed and Breakfast. Kind of a takeoff on bed and breakfast, but it was an air bed. And they priced it at $80. And on that website, the week of the Industrial Design Conference, they got three visitors. That was it. It was a gentleman from India. It was a woman about 35 or 40 years old, and a guy from Utah. So it was a random set of people, but they weren't 20-somethings just looking for a crash pad like you're hiking across Europe looking for a youth hostel. These were people that were professionals, over 30 years old, looking for a place to crash, and so they paid $80 each. So they said, wow, that's really great. And right about after the time that happened, they had found themselves a Harvard graduate who was be a tremendous architect for the technical side of the site and the systems that are behind it to connect the people that want to rent a room with people that have a room to rent. And his name is Nathan Blecharczyk. And now they got the three guys that would become the trio of founders of Airbnb: Brian Chesky, Joe Gebbia, and Nathan Blecharczyk. And they would make history. So they went off to South by Southwest. I don't know if you know what that is. That's an incredible conference. It's in Austin, Texas every year. Started out as a music conference, but now there's interactive and education. There's a bunch of different topics that are there. So they headed down there because there's a lot of startups down there. There's a lot of venture capital people. They head to Austin. They set up shop. They announce that Air Bed and Breakfast is up there and going strong, and they get 2 bookings. 1, 2. That's it. And they're thinking, oh no, this is not working. We've come all the way down to South by Southwest. And they said, well, let's take another stab at it. So there's an important thing to learn here. They were committed to their original concept, and they kept at it for as long as they had resources. And the next thing that was coming up was in Denver, and it was a Democratic National Convention in 2008. And this is where Obama spoke, where the world and the U.S. saw him coronated as the Democratic nominee for president. Happened in Denver. And they're like, well, we'll get a bunch of places out there, and people will be able to stay there cheap because the whole world and media and press and everybody are convening in Denver and converging on Denver, and there's going to be a shortage of hotel rooms. Let's see if we could do it there. So they set up shop, and they gave notice out to 900 delegates, and they sent them the notifications. They did everything they could to let them know, and they got 50 reservations, which is better, but it was still not nearly enough. Along the way, you may have remembered this little news bit that went kind of viral. They had cereal, Obama O's and Captain McCain's. The cereal was branded for the two candidates running in the United States presidential election, John McCain and Barack Obama, who would win and become president, of course. Well, they made $30,000 taking cereal that was made by cereal companies, but putting in boxes branded for the candidates. So they made $30,000 to put a couple bucks in the pocket and make up for the fact that they had booked a whopping 50 reservations there at the Democratic National Convention. Well, at that time, they were just suffering. Their weekly revenue at that time was $200. That's not going to cut it. That doesn't even pay for your servers or anything. So these guys are starving to death. They make 30 grand on the cereal with the presidential election, and they go on and said, hey, maybe let's try the inauguration. So I'm going to stop right here and give you a bonus point for this week. Bonus point. And it is random event success is not a path to sustainable success. And I'm sure Paul's going to put a little graphic up there for that. But here's my point. You put up a website and you're doing videos for something. You have a viral video. That's one viral video. Sustainable success is building a repeatable customer base. And right now, Airbnb did not have a repeatable customer base. But nonetheless, they said, well, we did okay, if 50 reservations is okay, let's head to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. Because the press and the media and people are going to be converging on Washington, D.C. to see Obama sworn in as president. And, let's put up shop there. Well, they did a little better. They got 150 bookings. And they went back to San Francisco. And they're on the brink of being shut down. What did they do? They had a chance meeting with Paul Graham, who is the founder and entrepreneur behind the Y-Combinator incubator. It was an incubator where you could get some money, you could get mentorship from people, and more importantly, it was a 3-month, 4-month intensive program that ended with what's called Demo Day, where you would present what you've been working on and incubating and improving with all this great mentorship. You would present it to venture capitalists to see people go, maybe give you your first round of capital. So they did that. And in the winter, January of 2009, they get into the Y-Combinator incubator. And so they're often, learning and things like that. And they had about $20,000 budget to work with during that little phase there, just a few months at the incubator. And they went with a new and different logo, which one you may recognize right here. This became the Airbnb logo, as good as I can draw it for you there. And at the end of it, something happened. A VC from Sequoia said on Demo Day, I think there's something here. And they gave them $600,000 in seed capital. So now they had mentorship, they had refined their idea, and they had the trust and belief of Sequoia Capital. And as very interesting, Brian Chesky at that time would say, this was the most important 3 months in the company's history. Now let's take a look at that. When I, at the beginning of this video, I talked about being early. But be early about getting mentors. Get mentors right out of the gate. Find people that know what they're doing in mentorship. And if you're in a town or a city that's got a startup environment, get involved in that environment. Or find an incubator and see if you can apply for admission so that your idea is good enough to get you in the door, where you'll get a little bit of money, you get resources like servers and bandwidth, but more importantly, you'll get mentorship from people that have walked that path before. And that's exactly what happened here, and it led to them getting $600,000 in seed. They also talked to the legendary venture capitalist, Fred Wilson. He's a great guy, he's done a lot of great investments, but as they say, even Babe Ruth struck out from time to time. And he said, this problem of connecting spare rooms and people is a bitch, and you won't solve it, and it's gonna kill you. Well, Fred was wrong, but he's been right about many, many other things. But it's always a badge of honor for startups to actually be able to say, this guy was wrong, but we still made it anyway. And nonetheless, I think Fred nowadays will tell you, hey, you win some, you lose some, you're right, you're wrong, and he moved on and they moved on. So the boys, our trio, heads to New York and they start talking to people. One of those points I brought up, get close to your customers. They start talking to people that they call the hosts, the people that are renting out the rooms. They started talking to people who are the guests that were renting, asking them questions back and forth. And what they discovered was a lot of the pictures taken by hosts, people maybe like you and me that got a room to rent, were terrible. So they said, look, this is all part of the branding and marketing. Why would someone say, yeah, I want to stay there for one night in New York if it doesn't look good? And so they put a program in place where they sent a professional photographer out to take quick pictures of these locations, and guess what? They immediately noticed that those that they had the better pictures of, over a 1 week time frame, were being rented 2 times to 3 times more often as the others. So there you have it, getting close to the customer, which is the host and the guest, and refining your marketing was something that they learned at the incubator, and they were iterating very, very fast. And before you know it, they were suddenly at $400 a week, and they were growing. A big hit happened when Barry Manilow's drummer rented an entire house. Now, if you don't know anything about Barry Manilow, he was a kind of a pop star in the 70s and 80s United States. And the word Manilow is Swedish, which really means man is lame. I'm going with that, and don't send me any notes on it. That's what I'm going with. And if you've ever listened to Barry Manilow's music, been tortured in that way, you'll know man is lame. Nonetheless, his drummer, of all people, rents an entire house, and that's like an aha moment. And the company is starting to grow. An interesting thing happens. That was an inflection point during that time period, and they went out in 2010, so within 1 year, and they raised $7.2 million in a round from Sequoia, again joining, and Greylock. Well, now they're pretty sure that they've got a pretty good hit on their hands. So let's talk about the challenges that happen and what the amazing growth statistically and valuation-wise. So they, at the time of that, were well on their way, and a year later in 2011, check this out, they hit their 1 millionth booking. This white line here is the bookings. And they raised $112 million in a Series B from Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, the founder of Netscape, one of the first browsers way back. Well, $112 million from him and others. It's a $1 billion valuation. Let's take a quick reflection back. 2 years prior, they were getting into the incubator because they had almost died, $200 a week, selling cereal at the Democratic National Convention, and look at that. 2 years later, $1 billion valuation, and Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, and Greylock, pillars of the venture capital community, are in this deal. Fantastic. It's now what we call a unicorn.
Tom's word of the day.
Startups that get a valuation of $1 billion are called unicorns. And this unicorn was not based on eyeballs, like early Twitter, or users, like early Instagram. It was based on money. It had a business model. I want to rent a room, you want to rent that room from me. They take a cut of both. It was a business model. So from the beginning, they were making revenue and they were making profits. We go driving down, and about this time, came their first controversy, and they got over their first controversy, and that was, it was bound to happen. Somebody comes home and she finds her entire house trashed and everything stolen, cleaned out. Well, as a young company, sometimes you know what to do, sometimes you don't. And at this time, they refused to help. You rented this at your own risk. The publicity and backlash was terrible, and they finally came out and said, wait. We will help you. We didn't do it. Right? But we weren't a cause of this, but we get it. We got to put something in place. So they launched a $50,000 insurance program for people that were the hosts, that were renting. And they also reached back out to the woman that had all that stuff happen, and they helped her out a little bit and worked with her. There was another incident where somebody rented their place out and they came back in to find all kinds of drug paraphernalia, meth pipes and some other things that were left there. So people obviously rented it to get together with a group of people and have a party and get seriously high on some really dangerous drugs. So nonetheless, there was some protection that put in place. And before long, this $112 million has carried them, and they have their 5 millionth booking. And what was very interesting, right here at the end of 2012, they had sold that year more nights than Hilton. More nights than Hilton. A 3-year-old company sells more nights than Hilton, 1 room at a time. There is only one word for that, and that is damn! That's amazing. And suddenly they were doing more per nights rentals than Hilton was. That's incredible. Well, they continued to expand, they continued to drive forward, and in 2013 they raised $200 million in their Series C, and that involved Founders Fund. Peter Thiel, somebody who I have incredible respect for and admiration, in the book 0 to 1. If you haven't read that, I've mentioned it in some of my other case studies on here. Go get a copy of that book and make sure you take notes in it, you have bookmarks in it, and it stays on your shelf, because it's exactly what you need at the beginning. And if you can get into an incubator along the way, so much the better. But now Peter Thiel's in the deal, Founders Fund is in the deal, and they're headed toward $10 million in bookings. Just a short time later, 1 year later, they suddenly raised $500 million in a Series D at a $10 billion valuation. So now their valuation is in the double-digit billion club. And along the way, another controversy was, you may have seen this in the media if you've studied Airbnb, a New Yorker was fined $2,400 for allowing people to stay in his apartment. And they were calling it unlicensed rental business or things like that. But Airbnb jumped in and they said, time out. We're going to help defend this guy and we're going to help pay his legal fees, because we don't like that law that doesn't allow people like you and me just to rent a room out. I mean, good grief, I rented a room from relatives when I was in college, and I was a relative and I paid $300 a month and, had room and board. Well, why not get $50 for somebody staying in an extra bedroom? And in many ways, the New York law is wrong-headed, but nonetheless, Airbnb jumped in, because that's the kind of legislation that can get in the middle of you. Go watch the case study I did on Uber and see how they dealt with legislation and governments and trying to stop the hand of capitalism and startups. There's some great points in that one as well. So here we go, the $10 billion club here. And moving on, and in 2014, they changed their logo, and that was also controversial, because many people thought that this logo was could be interpreted a lot of ways in sort of a female interpretation way. And they thought it was, do you think that's really a good logo and good taste? It's a little too suggestive. But nonetheless, they went with it, and the controversy just kind of washed ashore and then washed back out to sea as they were continuing to grow and cross 10 billion. I have a B there. Paul, look at this. I have a B. 5 million bookings, 10 billion bookings. That would be 1.1 booking for every person on Earth. And you know what that would be? Damn, a lot of bookings. But that's a mistake. That should be 10 million. So I'm going to put that right there. So 10 million bookings. So in the middle of doing a case study, I discover an error. But anyway, they go from 1 to 5 to 10 million bookings. Now you can see that things are just crazy and just going very, very well. They're raising money, they're expanding internationally, and along the way here, they also expanded that insurance program from $50,000 to $1 million. Again, doing the right thing, trying to set things up so you and I can feel confident about renting out our home or a room in our apartment or our flat. So we move forward here to 2015, and they raised $1.5 billion from General Atlantic, Hill House Capital, and the great Kleiner Perkins. So now they are, Series Z is in the bank, and the valuation is now $25 billion. And then $850 million in middle of 2016 from Capital G, which is Google Capital, and that's how they go. That's their new branding, Capital G. So now you even have Google in the game. So if you think about search and search technology and finding places to stay, now you've got the biggest search company in the world on your board and with big skin in the game, and so you're ready to go to the next level. And at this time, it's worth noting that their $30 billion valuation, that compares favorably with Hilton, who's worth $28 billion enterprise valuation. So now these guys are worth as much as Hilton. Amazing stuff. So what's next as they're sitting here? Well, there's a couple things. There's still challenges in the regulatory environment. As a matter of fact, not too long ago, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York trying to put another bill in place, trying to put fines on Airbnb hosts if they do certain things. And so they're having to fight the regulatory battle. They've also got something coming, a thing called experiences, where maybe a local person, as you use Airbnb to stay in New York, a local person could give you a tour of the neighborhood and maybe some of the more interesting sites. So extending the way that people like you and me could use our room that we rent and our local knowledge to make a little bit of money. And more recently, that just closed in February 2017, they bought Luxury Retreats, which is out of Canada, had 2 rounds, $16 million from Inovia Capital. Here's a little lesson for you. Inovia, over just about, I think it was 2 to 3 years, Luxury Retreats was renting villas all around the world. And now they're talking about using the Airbnb engine to be a way to connect people that want to rent those villas with the owners or the host of those villas. So 2 rounds of capital over just a couple years from Inovia Capital, and they get bought for $200 million by Airbnb. So they used some of this $850 million to go make an acquisition of a high-end company that had a ton of listings on villas. So here's another investment lesson. For those of you scoring at home, Inovia Capital, it put in 16, 200 comes out. That's about a 10x return. So they made 10x. So again, for those of you scoring at home, trying to figure this out, Inovia Capital invest 16 and probably got 10x back. That's pretty amazing. And for those of you not scoring at home, get on Airbnb, rent a room, and then download Tinder. Maybe that'll help you. Airbnb, the second most valuable private company in the US venture scene, second only to Uber, making money with an estimate, just came out, this amazing estimate that in 2020, people believe these guys could have $2 to $3 billion in profits in just a few years. Amazing things. So as we look at it, get connected to your customers early, the way they did in New York, and taking pictures and improving it. And get connected to mentorship early. And if you've got an opportunity to take your idea and to pitch it to an incubator to get in for a 90-day program or something, you go do that, because what you'll learn and a little bit of capital, it's just amazing. That's this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to Valuetainment for more case studies by the Biz Doc and the best content on the internet for entrepreneurs. Until next time, I'm Tom Ellsworth, and I hope I left you better than I found you.